He was born in one empire, built his career in a second, and died serving a third, and none of them were Germany. Arthur Phleps is one of the strangest figures of the entire Second World War. A man who spent his whole life fighting for countries that weren't really his, in wars that kept changing their meaning, under flags that rose and fell around him like weather. He survived everything: trenches, mountain warfare, the Eastern Front, partisan hunting across the Balkans. And then, in the final years of the war, he walked into a field in Romania and simply disappeared. But let's start at the beginning, because the beginning is where this story gets interesting. Arthur Phleps was born on November 29th, 1881, in Berthelm, a small Saxon town in Transylvania. Today, that's Romania. In 1881, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The town itself was part of a centuries-old German-speaking community called the Transylvanian Saxons, people whose ancestors had settled that region in the 12th century and somehow maintained their language, their culture, and their distinct identity through hundreds of years of living surrounded by Romanians, Hungarians, and Ottomans. That background matters because Phleps grew up with a very specific identity, ethnically German, but not from Germany. A member of a minority that had survived for centuries by being tougher, more organized, and more disciplined than everyone around them. That mindset would follow him for the rest of his life. He entered the Austro-Hungarian military as a young man, and he was good at it immediately. The Austro-Hungarian Army was a fascinating institution, a multinational force that had to somehow hold together soldiers speaking a dozen different languages from a dozen different ethnic backgrounds under a single imperial command structure. It required officers who could manage complexity, who could lead men who didn't share their language or their culture, who could operate effectively in chaotic, mountainous, difficult terrain. Phleps thrived in exactly that environment. By the time World War I broke out in 1914, he was already a capable officer with experience in the kind of irregular, terrain-dependent warfare that the Austro-Hungarian Army specialized in. He served throughout the war on multiple fronts: the Balkans, the Eastern Front, the Italian Front in the Alps. He was decorated multiple times. He developed a particular expertise in mountain warfare that would define his military identity for the rest of his career. When the war ended and the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed into a dozen successor states, Phleps was 40 years old, decorated, experienced, and suddenly without a country. The empire he had served his entire adult life simply ceased to exist. The peace settlements after World War I redrew the map of Central Europe completely. Transylvania, where Phleps was born, was transferred to Romania. And so, almost by accident, Arthur Phleps became a Romanian citizen. He joined the Romanian Army. And here's where his story takes a turn that most military careers never see. He didn't just join as a junior officer starting over. He joined with his full Austro-Hungarian rank and experience recognized, and he rose quickly. By the 1930s, he held the rank of general in the Romanian army. He had gone from serving the Austro-Hungarian Empire to commanding Romanian forces without ever leaving the region where he was born. He served Romania for nearly 2 decades. He modernized Romanian mountain troops. He trained officers. He built a reputation as one of the most competent military professionals in the entire Romanian armed forces. Any reasonable observer watching his career in 1938 would have said, here is a man who found his place. A Transylvanian Saxon who made himself essential to Romania. And then the Second World War started changing everything around him again. Romania in the late 1930s was a country under enormous pressure. Nazi Germany was the dominant power in Central Europe, and the Romanian government was navigating a complicated relationship with Berlin, trying to maintain independence while acknowledging German dominance. For ethnic Germans living in Romania, the Volksdeutsche, as the Nazis called them, this created a strange situation. Suddenly, their ethnic background was politically significant in a way it hadn't been before. Germany was interested in them. The SS was recruiting among them. Phleps made his choice in 1941. He resigned from the Romanian army and volunteered for the Waffen-SS. He was 59 years old. Think about that for a second. Most men at 59 are winding down. Phleps was starting his third military career in his third army under his third flag. And the Waffen-SS, which was actively looking for experienced officers to lead the ethnic German formations it was building across occupied Europe, received him with open arms. He was commissioned as an SS Gruppenführer, a rank roughly equivalent to lieutenant general, and assigned to the Wiking Division, one of the premier Waffen-SS formations on the Eastern Front. The Viking was unusual, even within the SS. It was multinational, drawing volunteers from Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Belgium, and other occupied or allied countries. Phleps, with his entire career spent managing multinational forces in complex terrain, was a natural fit. The Eastern Front in 1941 and 1942 was unlike anything that had come before. The scale was incomprehensible. Fronts stretching thousands of kilometers, battles involving millions of men, casualties that made the Western Front of World War I look modest by comparison. The Viking Division fought in the southern sector, pushing into Ukraine and toward the Caucasus as part of Germany's attempt to capture Soviet oil fields and knock the USSR out of the war. Phleps performed well. He had decades of experience that most Waffen-SS officers simply didn't have. He had been in serious combat before most of them were born. His understanding of terrain, logistics, and the management of soldiers under extreme stress gave him an edge. He was promoted, decorated, and given more responsibility. But the Eastern Front was not where Phleps would make his most lasting and most terrible mark. In 1942, Himmler tasked Phleps with something new. The Balkans were burning. Yugoslavia had been occupied and dismembered, but the partisan resistance, led primarily by Josip Broz Tito's communist partisans and the royalist Chetniks, was tying down enormous numbers of German and Italian troops. The occupation was brutal, the resistance was brutal in return, and the whole region was sliding into a vicious cycle of atrocity and reprisal. Himmler wanted a Waffen-SS division built specifically from the ethnic German population of Yugoslavia. The Volksdeutsche, who lived in the Banat region and other parts of the former Yugoslavia. Phleps was given the job of building it. The result was the 7th SS Volunteer Mountain Division, known as Prince Eugen. Named after Prince Eugene of Savoy, the great Habsburg military commander who had fought the Ottomans in the 17th century. A deliberate choice that connected the division to the long history of ethnic Germans in the Balkans. And here is where the story becomes very dark. The Prince Eugen Division was not deployed to a conventional front. It was deployed to the Balkans to fight partisans, and in the language of German anti-partisan warfare, fighting partisans very quickly became something that had almost no relationship to conventional military operations. The doctrine that German forces applied in Yugoslavia was based on collective punishment. Villages suspected of sheltering or supplying partisans were burned. Civilians were executed as reprisals. The standard German formula was 100 civilians killed for every German soldier killed by partisans. Men of fighting age were shot on suspicion. The line between partisan combatants and civilian population was deliberately erased because erasing that line made the killing easier to justify. Prince Eugen was at the center of this. The division participated in multiple major anti-partisan operations, Fall Weiss, Fall Schwarz, and others, which were nominally military operations aimed at encircling and destroying Tito's partisan forces. In practice, these operations involved enormous civilian casualties, mass executions, and the destruction of entire communities. Phleps commanded these operations. He issued orders. He set the operational parameters. He was not a distant figure who didn't know what was happening. He was the commanding general, present, active, and responsible. The numbers are staggering. Across the Balkans, German anti-partisan operations resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Yugoslavia lost a higher proportion of its pre-war population than almost any other occupied country in Europe, and the forces under Phleps's command were among the primary instruments of that killing. There was another dimension to the horror in the Balkans that Phleps was directly involved in. The independent state of Croatia, the fascist puppet state that Germany and Italy had established after the dismemberment of Yugoslavia, was simultaneously conducting its own genocide against the Serb, Jewish, and Roma populations within its borders. The Ustaše, the Croatian fascist movement that ran this state, carried out massacres of extraordinary brutality. The methods were so savage that even some German officers, men who had participated in mass killings on the Eastern Front, filed official complaints about what they were witnessing. The relationship between German forces, including Phleps's units, and the Ustaše was complicated. Sometimes they cooperated, sometimes there was friction, but the overall structure, German occupation, Croatian puppet state, systematic murder of minority populations, was something Phleps operated within and helped sustain. He was also directly involved in the persecution of the Jewish population of the Balkans. The SS was the primary instrument for organizing deportations to the death camps, and Phleps, as a senior SS commander in the region, was part of that machinery. By 1943, Phleps had been given command of the 5th SS Mountain Corps, a corps-level command that put him in charge of multiple divisions operating across the Balkans. He was one of the senior German commanders in Yugoslavia, responsible for the military campaign against the partisans and for the security of the occupation in a broad sense. The partisan war was not going well. Tito's forces were resilient, adaptable, and growing stronger despite enormous casualties. Every time the Germans launched a major operation and claimed to have destroyed the partisan movement, it reconstituted itself somewhere else. The brutality of the German approach, the collective punishments, the mass executions, the burning of villages, was creating new partisans faster than the old ones could be killed. It was a war that Germany could not win by the methods it was using. Phleps's forces were grinding through the Balkans, causing immense suffering and not achieving the strategic objective. Meanwhile, the overall war was turning. Stalingrad, in the winter of 1942 to 43, had broken the myth of German invincibility. The Kursk offensive in the summer of 1943 failed. Allied forces landed in Sicily and then on the Italian mainland. The strategic situation was deteriorating in every direction. In 1944, Phleps's 5th SS Mountain Corps was redeployed to Romania as Soviet forces pushed westward following their massive summer offensive. Romania was Germany's most important ally in the east. Romanian oil was literally keeping the German war machine running, and the defense of Romania had become critical. It was in Romania that Arthur Phleps's story ended. In September 1944, Romania abruptly switched sides. The Romanian government, seeing the direction the war was going, signed an armistice with the Soviet Union and declared war on Germany. Romanian forces that had been fighting alongside the Germans suddenly turned on them. For German units in Romania, the situation became extremely dangerous overnight. Phleps was in the field near Arad in western Romania when the Romanian switch happened. The exact circumstances of what followed are unclear. The historical record is fragmentary and disputed. What is known is that on September 21, 1944, Arthur Phleps was captured by Romanian or Soviet forces near Arad. He was 62 years old. He was never seen alive again. The most widely accepted account is that he was shot shortly after capture, executed in the field rather than processed as a prisoner of war. Some accounts suggest Soviet forces killed him. Others suggest Romanian forces. The confusion is compounded by the chaos of the military situation at the time, with loyalties shifting and front lines dissolving. His body was never recovered. There was no trial, no formal execution, no documented death. He simply disappeared into the chaos of a collapsing front in September 1944, and that was the end of Arthur Phleps. After the war, the Prince Eugen Division and the broader German anti-partisan campaign in Yugoslavia were the subject of war crimes investigations. The Yugoslav government, under Tito, documented the atrocities committed by German and Allied forces during the occupation and pursued prosecutions where it could. The evidence of what Phleps's forces had done was extensive and documented. Phleps himself escaped any post-war accounting. He was already dead. But the record of what he commanded speaks clearly enough without a trial. So what do you make of Arthur Phleps? He was, by any measure, an extraordinarily experienced and capable military professional. 3 empires, 3 armies, 60-plus years of life spent mastering the craft of warfare. His expertise in mountain warfare and multinational force management was genuine and rare. In a different time, under different circumstances, he might have been remembered simply as one of the most interesting military careers of the 20th century. A Transylvanian Saxon who rose to general rank in 3 different armed forces across 2 world wars. But that's not what his career was. His career ended in the Balkans, commanding forces that burned villages, executed civilians, and participated in the broader machinery of Nazi occupation and genocide. The professional expertise he had spent a lifetime developing was placed entirely in the service of that. He made choices. At 59 years old, with a full military career already behind him, he joined the SS. He could have stayed retired. He chose not to. And the organization he chose, and what he did within it, is not something that the impressive resume before it can erase. 3 empires, 3 armies, 1 legacy, and that legacy is written in the Balkans, in the villages that no longer exist, in the people who never came home.